This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below.
Okay, so what's next for the Cleveland Browns, right? We then did the mad thing at the playoff game. We've been upset. We've talked about what the problems were. We talked about what went wrong in that game. And we're going to continue to talk about some of the fallout from that game as the days go on. But now we want to know what's next for this Cleveland Browns team. Like, what can they do to get better, and how will they get better next year? Well, the good news is that I'm pretty sure the Browns are going to be a better team on paper at the very least than they were last year, and simply because they're getting back some heavy hitters from injured reserve. Jack Conklin's going to be one of the most interesting things to see what they do in the offseason with, because he's unnecessary and he's expensive. And he's still young enough to where a team that needs a right tackle might want him bad enough to give you a little something for him. Now, I would temper my expectations on what you could get for Jack Conklin in a trade. I don't think you're going to get like anything meaty. I think you're going to get something like a fifth or sixth round pick or something like that for him, because part of that deal would be them eating up some of your money, and really less so than the pick that you would get for Jack Conklin. More so you would want the money you would free up from trading Jack Conklin, right? If you're confident that Dawand Jones can be the right tackle of the future and he's under a rookie deal for the next 3 years, you want to free up some of that money so you can put it at other places, so you can upgrade other places of this football team, mainly wide receiver, right? Like, you're probably going to want to throw some money at wide receiver this offseason, or even running back. And that's going to be how you would free that money up, is getting rid of the $20 million of Jack Conklin and then having that either be traded or something else down the line. But yeah, that's the first thing that we look at, right? Because Jack Conklin, you can keep him and have elite right tackle depth with Dawand Jones there, or you could trade him. So we'll see what happens there. Again, I don't expect trade competition to be anything crazy. You would basically be asking a team to take a flyer on Jack Conklin, which is fair. I think that flyer is worth a little bit of cash and a fifth or sixth round pick. And that's why I think they will probably get done with Jack. If you look at it as what are you getting for an all-pro player, sure, it can be kind of underwhelming, but Jack Conklin's not just an all-pro player. He is somebody who has also been injury prone and not a guarantee to play, so much so that the Browns drafted somebody to replace him. So, yeah, a fifth round pick. If you get a fourth out of him, that would be huge. And then you can free up that money. I would take it. Honestly, the money is more of the priority for the Cleveland Browns. If like you can get somebody to just take that whole 20 mil, they can get a seventh. But that's something that you're going to have to work out with a different team there. Nick Chubb coming back is going to be huge, right? Like that, there's no doubt about it that Nick Chubb coming back is a huge boon for this team. We saw how much we missed Nick Chubb all season because the run game just did not have any room for error. And that was one of the biggest problems that the run game had, is that they had no room for error, and Nick Chubb gives you such a room for error. Now, how good will Nick Chubb be? I don't know, but will Nick Chubb be better than Jerome Ford? Probably. Will Nick Chubb's presence make Jerome Ford a better running back? Probably. Just having Nick Chubb would be better for everybody. Getting Nick Chubb, it's obviously going to be good news. Jed Wills, who I think people grew a little bit more of an appreciation for him with him being out, because there was this like time period where people thought like Gary Christensen was playing better than Jed Wills, and I chose not to entertain those takes, because to me it was obvious Gary Christensen was not even close to as good as Jed Wills. Now look, Jed Wills has his flaws. Jed Wills is not the greatest tackle in the world. Jed Wills is arguably starting caliber. Jed Wills is much, much better than Gary Christensen. Gary Christensen kind of benefited from the fact that Joe Flacco got rid of the ball very quickly, but anytime that Joe Flacco had to hold on to the ball like more than 2.5 seconds, Jerrion Christian got exposed, right? Like you need Jed Wills back just so you can have that baseline at left tackle. Now, I'm not saying that the Browns aren't going to look into options at left tackle. I think on both, well, just the left tackle position, I think they're going to draft somebody. And my prediction for the type of player that they're going to go for is a bigger, stronger, more run game focused tackle on that left side. Jed Wills is a pass protector first, and he's average at pass protecting, but he's not really the greatest run blocker in the world. And I think that for what they want to do going forward with the run game, they're going to need the tackles to be able to hold it down and be a little bit bigger and a little bit more physical. And with Deshaun Watson coming back, you're going to want tackles who are a little bit bigger, a little bit more physical, because Deshaun's not going to ask you to hold a traditional pocket as much. And I think Jed doesn't really thrive in a situation where people are asking him to hold a traditional pocket. That being said, Jed not thriving in all, still better than not having Jed Wills. So left tackle, like, you just want to have Jed Wills at that baseline, but I would also like, and when I'm at the Senior Bowl, the last week of the month, I'm going to keep a real keen eye on left tackle, because I think the Browns are probably going to target a left tackle in this draft with one of their first picks. But yeah, left tackle, that's going to be relatively important for the Cleveland Browns as well. Let's see what else. Okay, now free agency is also what the Browns have to look forward to. Now, before we can focus on who we're going to get, we got to focus on who we might lose. Now, the Browns are set to lose 26 players in free agency. I'm not going to go super in depth into all of these names. I'm not even going to name all of the names. What I am going to say here is just the players I think we're going to have conversations about if the Browns need to keep these players. And maybe that's going to be a video in itself, or maybe each of these players end up being their own video. Zadarius Smith, that's going to have to be a conversation. I think Sione Takitaki and Anthony Walker are their own conversation. The Browns choose to keep them. Jordan Elliott is going to be a conversation. Shelby Harris is going to be somebody you're going to have a conversation about. Maurice Hurst, same thing. Ronnie McLeod, same thing. Corey Bojorquez, same thing. Kareem Hunt, a little bit. Joe Flacco, yeah, you're going to want to have a conversation about if you want to keep Joe Flacco, if you can keep Joe Flacco, and what number makes a ton of sense to keep Joe Flacco there. So that's going to be the beginning of that free agency talk. And then once you lose all those players, you see what kind of salary cap space you have. You're going to want to talk about bringing in guys. And for those of you who are like, the Browns bringing in somebody, yeah, the Browns are going to be able to bring in guys this year. They're going to be able to extend guys, keep guys, bring in guys. They still have salary cap space. Like, don't let what people who kind of glance at the Browns salary cap space by looking at like Spot Track fool you into what the Browns salary cap situation is. It's not what people have made it out to be. And people are genuinely wrong on this. Like, you have to look for people who really pay attention to this salary cap stuff. And everybody I know who pays attention to this tells me the Browns are in fine shape when it comes to salary cap space, at least for next year. Now, obviously, at some point, the bill's going to come due, but you're trying to combine how much of that bill is coming due versus the salary cap continuing to rise. And since the cap keeps rising, then the bill becomes less and less and less. It's like reverse interest if you think about it like that. But that's what the Browns are doing with the salary cap, and they should be in fine enough shape to be able to keep some guys and bring some guys back, and then also add some new names to this list. And there's also stuff that they can do, like Jack Conklin, or maybe an Amari Cooper restructure, the inevitable Deshaun Watson restructure. All of these things can help them figure things out for next year and the years on and on and on and on and on and on and on. So that's that for free agency. Also, draft is going to be important. And I kind of announced this while I was talking about it, and I kind of announced this on the live stream, but this is me officially announcing it on the channel. I'm going to be in Mobile, Alabama with a media credential during the 3 days of Senior Bowl practice for the Senior Bowl this year, which means I'm not going to be relying on people recording video of the Senior Bowl practice to cover it. I'm not going to be relying on watching the NFL Network's coverage of the Senior Bowl. I will be there up close and personal. Maybe might even get to talk to some of these guys at the Senior Bowl, but I will be there, media coverage in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl practices. And that means that I'm going to be able to give you an in-depth look of that more so than I've been able to in the past. And I hope that you guys enjoy that coverage of the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, because I'm very excited to do it. It's the first time I've done something like this since my AFC North camp tours. This is a little bit different than that, and a little bit more functional than that. But yeah, I'm super excited about doing that. And the reason I chose the Senior Bowl as the event that I really wanted to get a good look in is because the Browns love the Senior Bowl. If we just go off of last year, there are 5 rookies on this team that were there in Senior Bowl week in Mobile, Alabama last year. Cedric Tillman, DeJuan Jones, Siaki Ika, Isaiah McGuire, Ronnie Hickman. 5 guys right there. They were all there in Mobile, Alabama. Didn't know they were going to be Browns, but they ended up being Browns. And every year it's a list like that where the Browns bring in a ton of guys from the Senior Bowl, especially since Andrew Berry has been here, especially since the Deshaun Watson trade where we have to kind of pick these guys in the back end. So that's why I wanted to go to Senior Bowl, because I think that's going to be the most pertinent that's going to be the most pertinent prospect coverage that you can get, is what happens in the Senior Bowl. That's going to be most important for the Cleveland Browns and what they do in the draft, because the Senior Bowl, while you will get some first round picks at the Senior Bowl, while you will see some guys raise their stock to the first round or maybe even the second round, a lot of those guys in the Senior Bowl, it's third round and back. And the Browns are going to do most of the work third round and back in the NFL draft. So that's going to be awesome to see and to be at. But that's what's next for the Cleveland Browns, right? They got to figure out who's coming back healthy, what they're going to do with all these guys that are coming back healthy. They got to figure out what they're going to do in March in free agency. They got to figure out what they want to do in the draft. And they got to get eyes on prospects and everything else. And I think that this team's going to has multiple avenues to improve and get even better. And that's awesome, because they were a pretty damn good team with 26% of the salary cap on IR. Now, the big elephant in the room when it comes to talking about anything, preparing for the season, all of this is Deshaun Watson, right? He's kind of been the elephant in the room for the last couple of years. And what we know now is a lot different than what we knew last year, right? Last year, we thought the season would depend on how well Deshaun Watson plays. That was my line was, hey, man, if Deshaun plays well, we're going to win a bunch of games. If he doesn't, we're not. I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. I think the floor of this team, especially when the defense is playing well, and I know it's hard to remember that the defense was good after they gave up a bunch of points to the Texans in the playoffs, but they were good for the most part this season. They're going to be able to add some pieces and get healthier and hopefully fix whatever it was that made them a bad road defense this year and perfect that formula for them. But they're going to have a good enough defense next year, and they're going to have good enough pieces around the quarterback next year to where you're not going to necessarily need Deshaun to live up to whatever people think $230 million worth of quarterback is. What you do need Deshaun Watson to do is play at a certain level. And there were glimpses of him being able to play at that level, or him just flat out playing at that level during the season before he went out for injury both times, right? We talk about it. He didn't get more than 3 games in a row with this team. And I think if he played like 8 games in a row, we would have a very different conversation about Deshaun Watson, because we would have a much clearer picture, because we saw him add those games up. And the example I use, and I don't expect him to be Lamar Jackson next year, so don't get that out of this, but the example I use for this Browns team and why we didn't see the number explosion from Deshaun Watson is you go back and look at what Lamar Jackson was doing in the early part of the season. It wasn't consistent, right? It was up and down. And there were points where people were like, hey, man, I don't think this Todd Monken thing is working out. And then they just put weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks of work together. And the next thing you know, it's week 8. And the Baltimore Ravens have the most dangerous offense in the NFL, or one of the most dangerous offenses in the NFL, after trying to get it together. And my point there is, The Browns are trying to kind of merge two styles together. What you saw with Joe Flacco was somebody who was very comfortable in a style, in an offense that Kevin Stefanski's very comfortable coaching. So it kind of clicked and fit like that. And that's all well and good and all. And I think that's going to be what you want from a backup situation for the Browns, that you can always just revert back to that, right? But we saw the limitations of relying on Joe Flacco being able to kind of reignite some of that, right? He's going to turn the ball over at a higher rate, not as much mobility. Sometimes the run game suffers because of that. Okay, we saw the limitations of that. You still need Deshaun Watson to play well if this team wants to hit its ceiling. And for the Browns, in order to get the most out of Deshaun Watson, you're not going to just stick him in what you did for Joe Flacco. And that's not what the Browns' plan has been. They've been trying to make this thing work. And there's been moments where we're like, okay, it's getting there, right? The Arizona game, the Baltimore game, and then the Tennessee game where we're like, hey, man, they're putting things together. Okay, he got hurt. So we got to start back at square one. He comes back from injury. They start putting things together again. He gets hurt again. I think truly, unless like that shoulder injury was so devastating that he's never physically the same player again, but assuming Deshaun is able to recover from a relatively routine injury, because it was a muscle injury, it was a bone injury, my bad, not a muscle injury. So he should be able to recover that and be 100% of who he used to be physically. Assuming he's able to do that, I think the Browns will figure out something to be at least very good with on offense, right? Like maybe you don't get 4,500 passing yards out of him. Maybe you don't get 35 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. Maybe he doesn't give you an MVP type season, but if this team is good enough around him, to me, it's the Matt Stafford game plan when it comes to getting the most out of this Deshaun Watson trade. Some people might say that's a disappointment because you expected him to be an MVP candidate when you traded all those draft picks for him. And while that is a fair point, if the team is good enough to win, the team is good enough to win. And who cares if Deshaun Watson's a little underwhelming if he's playing a role that's vital to helping the team win? Like, could he be better? Sure. Are we probably going to end this thing wishing that he would have lived up to the expectations a little bit more? Sure. I don't really doubt that. But if you could get a Matt Stafford type run out of him, I think that would be probably good enough for this team with all the pieces around him to win the championship. It's a complex conversation. And to me, I'm not as concerned about the whole media angle of can Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski figure who needs to conform the who system and all that. Like, that's going to be a hot topic for the offseason, and people are going to digest that for sure. And I'm not as concerned about that. Like, I think Kevin and Deshaun will figure it out. I think there were signs of them figuring it out. Just injury got in the way every time that they started to kind of figure some things out and stack those things on top of each other. They just didn't get the amount of games that you would want to get to. Again, I used the Lamar Jackson, Todd Monken thing as an example where people weren't hot on that at the beginning of the season. They got much better towards the end of the season because they were just able to stack games on top of each other. So to me, I'm not as concerned about the thought or the ideal that Kevin and Deshaun are incompatible with each other. They're going to be fine. Like, they're going to be they're going to have to figure some things out. It's not going to be perfect. They got to get these reps together. But once they get these reps, I think they'll be fine. The bigger concern to me is, can Deshaun Watson stay healthy? Like, that's the thing that I'm truly concerned about. Because if Deshaun Watson is capable of giving you 5 good games every year, but he's only capable of playing 5 games, and that's a bigger problem than if he fits perfectly with the offense or not, right? So that's my bigger concern, is like, hey, can Deshaun Watson stay healthy? Is he going to make the adjustments to his play style to stay healthy? Is he going to do what's necessary for him to stay healthy? Or, like, is his body going to cooperate? Because sometimes you can do everything right. You can try not to get hit and you still get hurt because your body just doesn't cooperate. Like, are all of these things going to cooperate with him so he can stay healthy? That's the bigger concern for me. And I think that's the bigger concern for the Cleveland Browns going forward is like, hey, we don't know if we can trust them to be healthy. I trust them enough to find a way to figure it out with Kevin Stefanski and to put together a good offense. It's not going to turn the ball over a ton next year. Like, that'd be fine. I wouldn't be surprised if Deshaun Watson and Nick Chubb had a good offense next year. That's not going to shock me. But what I am concerned about and worried about is health. Can Deshaun Watson stay healthy? Because it's not just that he got hurt and went out for the year. It's that he got hurt multiple times throughout the year to the point where he was never able to play more than 3 consecutive games in this season. That's the concern. Like, is he always going to be in and out? Is his body breaking down on him? Or was this just a bad luck season? That's what I'm more concerned about. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.